You're lying in bed. The lights are low. The day's almost over, but your brain? Yeah, it's wide awake. And suddenly, out of nowhere, you start thinking about tomorrow's breakfast. Maybe a smoothie, maybe a bowl of quinoa with chia seeds on top. Because hey, they're superfoods, right? But then that tiny voice in your head goes, super, according to who? Welcome to the corner of the internet where curiosity doesn't clock out, and boredom finally gets some sleep. Tonight, we're going on a quiet little trip through time, from the icy mountains of the Inca Empire to the neon aisles of modern grocery stores, to uncover how a few ordinary plants became global symbols of purity, health, and, of course, marketing genius. This is a story where history mixes with hype, where science flirts with storytelling, and where advertising sometimes wins the argument over archaeology. Because when you hear ancient superfood, it's easy to imagine wise old healers, secret temples, and golden bowls filled with mystical seeds. But the truth? It's not quite divine. It's a lot more human and, honestly, way more entertaining. So before you drift off to sleep, let's peel back the layers together, gently like an onion, but with fewer tears, and see how something as tiny as a seed grew into a billion-dollar idea. And if you like falling asleep to stories that make you laugh, learn and rethink everything you thought you knew about your fridge, go ahead, hit subscribe, take a deep breath, and get comfy. Because tonight, you'll find out that even the food sitting quietly on your plate has a history full of secrets. You ever notice how every generation thinks it just invented healthy eating? We act like we discovered kale, yoga, and oat milk all by ourselves, as if nobody before Whole Foods ever chewed a leaf and thought, hey, this might be good for me. It's kind of cute, actually. Every decade we crown a new miracle food, and yet somehow it's always something ancient, like quinoa, chia seeds, or acai berries. Because if it's ancient, it must be wise, right? Ancient is marketing gold. You can slap that word on just about anything. Ancient skincare, ancient meditation, ancient grain cookies, and boom, suddenly it sounds sacred and expensive. Add a beige label, a few words in Sanskrit, maybe a leaf logo, and congratulations, you've just sold enlightenment in a bag. But tonight, let's take a little trip in the real-time machine, not the one marketers use, but the messy human kind that smells like dirt, sweat, and survival. Because behind every so-called superfood, there's an actual history, and it's usually way less glamorous than the packaging makes it seem. Let's start high up in the Andes. Thin air, freezing nights, no Wi-Fi, no smoothie bowls. Here, thousands of years ago, the Inca people grew quinoa. Not because it was trendy, but because it grew. Period. Quinoa isn't even technically a grain. It's what scientists call a pseudo-cereal, meaning it acts like a grain but technically isn't one. Basically, it's that kid who doesn't quite fit in but still aces every class. And quinoa's superpower wasn't spiritual, it was practical. It could survive poor soil, harsh weather, and zero TLC. Now, did the Inca call it a superfood? Of course not. They called it chia mama, the mother of all grains. To them, it wasn't a status symbol, it was survival food. Then came the Spanish conquistadors, who took one look at this sacred crop and said, nope, too pagan. They literally outlawed quinoa, forcing locals to grow wheat instead, because nothing says civilization like forcing someone to eat your carbs. And just like that, quinoa nearly disappeared from the Andes for centuries. Fast forward about 500 years. Western scientists rediscover it, run some studies, and surprise, it's healthy. Next thing you know, quinoa is selling for $15 a bag in Los Angeles, and the descendants of those Inca farmers, they can barely afford it. So yeah, quinoa went from food of the people to food of the privileged. That's progress for you. Now let's head north, to the Mayan and Aztec empires, where chia seeds had their moment. Long before they were sprinkled on avocado toast, chia seeds were used by ancient runners as endurance fuel. A handful of chia and a bit of water could keep a warrior going all day. Because chia absorbs up to 12 times its weight in liquid, basically it turns into edible gel. Perfect for surviving a desert marathon. Or, a Monday morning meeting. Chia's packed with omega-3s, or omega-3 fatty acids if you want to sound fancy. They're good for your brain, your heart, and your I'm trying to be healthy Instagram posts. But here's the catch. Chia's omega-3s are the plant kind, called ALA. Your body has to convert them into DHA and EPA, the kinds found in fish oil. And it's pretty terrible at doing that. It's like trying to turn a goldfish into a shark. The effort's there, but the results, not quite the same. Still, chia worked. It hydrated people, gave them energy and didn't spoil in the heat. No detox, no superfood revolution, just good nutrition doing its job. Then history forgot about chia until the 1980s. And when it came back, it wasn't in a health store. It was in your living room. Yep, the chia pet. Those little terracotta heads that grew green hair, that's chia. America literally turned a sacred Mayan food into a novelty plant toy. Only decades later did someone go, wait, what if we ate it? Add a little marketing. Throw in the word Aztec and boom, chia's a celebrity again. Because in American advertising, Aztec translates to mysterious, ancient, and probably good for your abs. Meanwhile, across the ocean, kale was living a very different story. No pyramids, no warriors, no spiritual chants, just mud, cold weather, and livestock. Kale was basically cow food. Farmers loved it because it didn't die in the winter. Nobody in medieval Europe looked at a kale leaf and thought, "This will cleanse my aura." They thought, "This will keep my pig alive." Fast forward to 2013. A New York PR firm invents the American Kale Association, which, by the way, didn't actually exist, and launches a fake press campaign to make kale the next big thing. They get restaurants to feature it, chefs to praise it, and soon Beyoncé's wearing a sweatshirt that just says kale. Boom. The pig food becomes pop culture. And that right there is modern alchemy, not turning metal into gold, turning vegetables into a lifestyle. Because in America, the real superpower isn't vitamins, it's branding. See, the whole ancient superfood idea works because it's not about nutrients, it's about nostalgia. We don't just want healthy, we want meaningful. We're tired of barcodes and processed stuff, so we crave something that feels authentic. Something that connects us to people who lived closer to the earth, before sugar, screens, and self-checkout machines. So when we see ancient superfood on a package, it's like a portal. It whispers, "This isn't just breakfast, this is wisdom." You're not just eating, you're reconnecting with your ancestors. Never mind that your ancestral grain was harvested last week by a machine in Nebraska. The truth is, we love the story more than the science. Because numbers on a nutrition label don't make us feel anything. But tell us quinoa was banned by conquistadors. Now we're hooked. Science informs, but myth sells. And honestly, that's not always a bad thing. Because beneath the buzzwords and the influencer posts, there's something beautiful about realizing how far we've come and how much we've forgotten. Back then, these foods weren't about glowing skin or weight loss. They were about survival, keeping a family alive through cold winters, dry seasons, and war. Every so-called superfood was just a simple human solution to a very real problem. Today, we've turned those same foods into status symbols. But maybe in doing so, we've stumbled on an uncomfortable truth. We're not really craving nutrients, we're craving meaning. So next time you see a $10 smoothie labeled Ancient Superfood Blend, just smile. You're not drinking ancient wisdom. You're sipping on 5,000 years of human storytelling, with a dash of irony and maybe a sprinkle of chia. And as we close this first chapter, here's the funny part. The real superfood isn't quinoa, kale, or chia. It's curiosity. Because every time you question a health trend or peek behind the label, you're feeding the one muscle that really matters, your brain. Now take a breath, relax, and let that thought settle in. Because in our next story, we'll dig deeper into how these ancient myths were built, who decided what was sacred, what got erased, and how a little storytelling turned survival food into superstition. But for now, just remember this, your dinner plate, it's basically a time machine. Every bite you take is a piece of history, wrapped in flavor, myth, and marketing. And somehow, that makes it taste even better. Here's a funny thing about history. It lies. Not maliciously, and more like accidentally. It's like a giant game of telephone that's been going on for thousands of years, except every player has an agenda. And by the time the story reaches us, in shiny packaging at a grocery store, it barely resembles the truth. We love the idea that our ancient superfoods have been passed down unchanged, pure, and mystical. But the real history? It's full of broken myths, bad translations, and a healthy serving of good old-fashioned human greed. Let's start with the myth that everything ancient is automatically better. It's comforting, right? The thought that people back then were wiser, more connected to nature, like some Instagram version of enlightenment, just with worse plumbing. But the truth is, ancient people weren't magical nutritionists. They ate what didn't kill them. And a lot of them died figuring that out. Take the Mayans again. Everyone pictures them sipping chia under a temple, talking about balance and wellness. In reality, food was often about power, not health. The elite ate differently from the workers, just like today. Chia and cacao, yes, chocolate, were valuable because they symbolized status, a kind of edible currency. If you were rich, you didn't just eat to survive. You ate to show that you could. Sound familiar? It's basically the same energy as someone posting a $20 smoothie on Instagram today. But here's where the real deception begins. Not in the past, but in how we interpret it. When archaeologists and anthropologists first started studying ancient diets in the 19th and early 20th centuries, they weren't neutral observers. They were mostly European men, trying to fit what they found into a Western narrative. If a civilization used herbs or plants for healing, they called it primitive medicine. But if a Greek did it, they called it early science. Funny how that works, right? So when they found old seeds, grains, or plants, they weren't thinking, oh, this is fascinating cultural nutrition. They were thinking, how can we use this? The superfood craze isn't ancient at all. It's colonial. We've been raiding other people's diets the same way we once raided their lands. Quinoa, chia, acai, they were never discovered. They were rebranded. Western explorers didn't just find new foods, they found new markets. And that's where our modern myths begin. When something that was once sacred or ordinary becomes exotic. Take acai, for example. Today it's the poster child of superfoods. Deep purple, Instagram perfect, blended into bowls so beautiful they look illegal. But before it hit Beverly Hills juice bars, acai was just a staple fruit in the Amazon. Locals used it for energy, yes, but also for survival, for calories. No one in the rainforest ever said, this is great for detox. That's a Western word, a modern religion dressed up as health science. In the early 2000s, marketers saw an opportunity. They heard antioxidants, another magic word, and ran with it. If you're wondering, antioxidants are molecules that help prevent damage to your cells. But here's the kicker. Your body already produces them naturally. Still, it sounds heroic, doesn't it? Fights free radicals. It's basically food's version of saying, now with 50% more epic. So acai gets bottled, branded, and blessed with phrases like ancient Amazonian wisdom. Celebrities start drinking it. Prices skyrocket, and somewhere in Brazil, a farmer still living on a few dollars a day watches Americans turn his breakfast fruit into a luxury product. That's not health, that's history repeating itself, this time with better fonts. And this myth of ancient purity, it's everywhere. Think about coconut oil. Advertised as a cure for everything from bad skin to heartbreak. Marketers call it an ancient island remedy, as if Polynesians invented skincare influencers before electricity. But coconut oil's original use wasn't just for beauty. It was for survival. It was fuel, food, medicine, and yes, occasionally skincare. We took one piece of that story, the pretty one, and turned it into a billion-dollar industry. That's the pattern. We cherry-pick the parts of history that make us feel special. We take someone's cultural tradition, remove the context, and sell it back with a tagline like ancient wisdom, modern life. Translation: we stole it, made it expensive, and now it's spiritual. But let's dig deeper. Because the deception isn't just in marketing, it's in how science itself got tangled up in it. In the 20th century, as nutrition science started to boom, researchers realized something. Health sells better when it has a story. If you tell people, eat this, it's high in protein, they'll shrug. But if you say, this seed sustained warriors of an ancient civilization, they'll buy 2 pounds of it immediately. It's not about biology, it's about identity. We don't want nutrients. We want narratives, and companies know that. They've turned history into a branding tool, a kind of edible mythology. That's why you'll see phrases like ancient Mayan secret or rediscovered by scientists on a label. The first one flatters your soul. The second flatters your ego. Either way, you feel enlightened when you eat it, even if you just spent $14 on fruit puree. But the irony goes even deeper. Because the more we mythologize these foods, the further we get from the people who actually created them. In the Andes, quinoa's global boom made it too expensive for locals who had farmed it for centuries. In the Amazon, acai production led to monoculture farms, destroying biodiversity in the name of eco-friendly exports. And chia, most of it's now grown in Australia and the US, shipped back to Latin America and sold as ancient. That's not just irony. That's economic theater. So when you see the word ancient on a package, remember, it doesn't mean old. It means someone else's history, rewritten for your comfort. But don't worry, we're all in on the joke now. Because the deception isn't entirely evil, it's human. We've always rewritten our past to make the present feel meaningful. Even ancient civilizations did it. Take the Egyptians. They believed certain foods connected them to gods. Onions, garlic, honey. They even buried honey jars in tombs for the afterlife. Was that science? No, it was faith. But in a way, so is our obsession with superfoods. We might not call it religion, but come on. We've got rituals, taboos, and even heretics. Try telling someone that kale isn't that great, and watch the room go silent. The line between belief and nutrition has always been blurry. We eat for meaning as much as for calories. That's why ancient sells. Not because we want to be healthier, but because we want to belong to something timeless. Still, it's worth asking, why do we keep falling for it? Maybe because modern life feels too synthetic, too fast, too filtered, too fake. And food feels like one of the few things left that can ground us. So when a label says ancient, it's like a promise. You're not just eating. You're reconnecting with nature, with history, with yourself. It's comforting. It's also, let's be honest, total marketing genius. But here's a twist most people don't know. Not all ancient foods are ancient. Some are literally modern inventions dressed in nostalgia. The Mediterranean diet, for example, didn't exist until the 1960s. It was invented by a scientist named Ancestral, who studied heart disease in Greece and Italy and thought, they eat olive oil and don't die as much. He published his findings, and boom, suddenly everyone's grandmother always ate Mediterranean, except most of those grandmothers were frying everything in lard, not olive oil. That's how myths work. They start with a fact, add a feeling, and end with a fantasy. And the best ones, the ones that stick, make you believe you're part of the story. So maybe the great deception of ancient superfoods isn't that they're fake. It's that we keep mistaking inspiration for information. We want our food to tell us who we are, not just feed us, but define us. And that's okay, as long as we know it's a story, not scripture. Because here's the real secret. Every ancient food is just another chapter in humanity's cookbook of survival. People discovered what grew, what healed, what killed, and they passed that knowledge down. Sometimes through legend, sometimes through science, often through both. And if there's one truth that's never changed, it's this. Food has always been storytelling you can taste. So, the next time you open a bag labeled Ancient Superfood, don't roll your eyes. Smile. You're holding centuries of curiosity, mistakes, and marketing in your hands. It's not evil, it's evolution. Just maybe skip the $15 smoothie. Your ancestors would want you to save your money. And as we wrap up this chapter, think of it this way. The deception we've unveiled isn't really about lies. It's about longing, for connection, for meaning, for a sense that the things we eat still have roots. Maybe that's the part of us that never stopped being ancient. Now take a breath, because in our next journey we're going to ask an even harder question. If the ancient world wasn't full of superfoods, then what did make their diets so powerful? How did people stay strong, live long, and build civilizations without protein shakes or chia puddings? That's where we're headed next, to the kitchens of the past, to find out what true nourishment really meant, before the hashtags. Here's the thing no one tells you about the past. People didn't have superfoods, they had food. That's it. Whatever grew, whatever didn't kill them, whatever kept them standing long enough to hunt, farm, or yell at their neighbor, and that was dinner. But that simplicity, that constant negotiation with nature, gave ancient diets something we've mostly lost. Balance. Not the kind you track on an app. The kind that's built into life itself, when seasons decide what's for dinner, not influencers. See, while we obsess over clean eating, our ancestors were just eating cleaner by default. No chemicals, no industrial farms, no ultra-processed snacks that somehow last longer than your phone contract. Their food spoiled fast, and which was both inconvenient and honest. Let's time travel again, shall we? Picture yourself in ancient Greece. Warm sunlight, marble columns, maybe a toga if you're feeling dramatic. People there didn't talk about calories or macros. They talked about balance, in the truest philosophical sense. Hippocrates, yes, the first do-no-harm guy, once said, "Let food be thy medicine." But don't imagine him sipping kale juice. He meant that the body thrives on moderation, on variety, and on foods that suit your climate and lifestyle. Fish if you live near the sea, grains if you're inland, olives because Well, you're Greek, and that's the secret of most ancient diets. They were local. People ate what they could grow, hunt or trade for within a few miles. That meant fresh ingredients, diverse nutrients, and way less sugar. It also meant eating seasonally, berries in summer, roots in winter, and fasting when the weather or gods demanded it. Fasting wasn't a diet trend. It was Tuesday. Now hop over to ancient Japan, an island where geography shaped every meal. Rice, fish, seaweed, soy, the same ingredients that now headline longevity studies. Modern scientists like to say the Japanese diet contributes to their long lifespan, and that's true. But here's the twist. It's not what they eat as much as how they eat it. Meals were slow, simple, portioned into small bowls eaten with mindfulness. In Japanese culture, there's a phrase, harahachi bu. It means, eat until you're 80% full. Imagine that, leaving the table not stuffed but satisfied. That's not a diet tip. That's ancient wisdom disguised as common sense. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, people were doing the same thing in their own style. Olive oil instead of soy, grapes instead of rice. But the rhythm was the same. Moderation, variety, community. Meals weren't eaten alone in front of a glowing screen. They were social, a daily ritual that connected you to family and neighbors. Because eating wasn't just about nutrition. It was about belonging. And that's where the real strength of ancient diets lies. Not in magical ingredients, but in context. They didn't eat quinoa because it had protein. They ate it because it grew. They didn't drink red wine for antioxidants. They drank it because it made dinner more joyful. They didn't chase health. They lived in ways that created it naturally. You could say their superfood wasn't food. It was rhythm. Modern science, in its own way, has started to rediscover that rhythm, but we've dressed it up in jargon. When we say gut microbiome, what we really mean is eat more plants, less junk. When we say circadian rhythm optimization, we're basically saying, go outside once in a while. We keep rebranding common sense as science, when most of it was figured out centuries ago by people who didn't even have microscopes. Of course, life wasn't perfect back then. Let's not romanticize it too much. Ancient people also died young, lacked medicine, and sometimes ate dirt, literally clay, because they thought it healed the soul. But even that instinct reveals something. They listened to their bodies. They didn't have nutrition labels, but they had intuition, a sense of connection to what sustained them. Contrast that with today. We live in a world where food is designed for shelf life, not human life, where we outsource our instincts to algorithms and then wonder why we feel tired, anxious, and oddly disconnected. So when we say we want to eat like the ancients, maybe what we really mean is, I want to remember what real food feels like. Let's look at a few civilizations that got it right, not by design, but by necessity. The Inca Empire, for instance, didn't just survive on quinoa. They engineered entire ecosystems of food. They grew potatoes, hundreds of varieties, each adapted to a specific altitude. They freeze-dried them naturally in the cold mountain air, creating chuño, a lightweight food that could last years. No chemicals, no preservatives, just clever engineering and cooperation with nature. Modern scientists now call that sustainable agriculture. The Incas called it Tuesday. Then there's the ancient Egyptians, often portrayed as bread and beer people. And yeah, they loved their carbs, but their bread was made from whole grains, rich in fiber and minerals. Their beer, closer to a smoothie than a six-pack. It was thick, fermented, full of nutrients, liquid bread basically. No wonder the workers who built the pyramids were paid in it. It wasn't just a drink, it was fuel. Try pitching that as a modern diet. The pyramid plan, carbs, beer, and occasional immortality. But beyond the jokes, there's a truth. Ancient diets worked because they matched the rhythm of life. Physical work burned calories. Food replenished them. There was a cycle, a logic, a connection. Even hunter-gatherers who had no farms, no recipes, had astonishingly diverse diets. Anthropologists have found that the average forager ate over 200 different types of plants a year. Compare that to the modern diet, where 75% of the world's food comes from just 12 plants and 5 animal species. We call it convenience. They'd probably call it boring. But here's where the ancient world truly humbles us. Their food was slow. Not slow like took too long at a restaurant, slow like earned. Every meal represented effort. Sowing, harvesting, grinding, cooking. That built respect. You didn't throw food away. You didn't overeat. You didn't need mindful eating classes, because eating was mindful by default. And that's the part of the ancient diet we desperately miss. We've kept the ingredients, or at least their expensive versions, but lost the relationship. We worship food as identity, but forget it's also conversation. Imagine inviting a Roman farmer to a modern supermarket. He'd be impressed by the abundance and horrified by the silence. Aisles of food, but no community. Options everywhere, but no story. And yet we still chase what they had. Energy, focus, strength, longevity. Through powders, supplements, and trends. We think the secret is in nutrients when it's really in nature. See, ancient diets weren't about adding more superfoods. They were about removing unnecessary noise. No sugar drinks, no mystery chemicals, no late-night Uber Eats because you deserve it. They worked with their environment, not against it. They didn't count calories. They counted seasons. They didn't fear carbs. They respected the effort it took to earn them. If that sounds boring, it's because we've been trained to see food as entertainment, not sustenance. The ancients didn't need cheat meals because their lives were the workout. They didn't need detox because their world hadn't invented tox. And maybe that's the punchline. The true superpower of ancient diets wasn't some rare seed or mystical berry. It was simplicity. Food wasn't a brand. It was a bond between land, body, and time. But simplicity doesn't sell well, does it? Eat real food, not too much, mostly plants, doesn't look great on a billboard. That's Michael Pollan's famous quote, and it could have been Hippocrates or your grandmother's. The wisdom hasn't changed. We just stopped listening. So maybe, just maybe, the ancient secret isn't hidden in the past at all. It's right here, waiting for us to slow down, chew slower, talk more, and reconnect. The irony? The future of food might look a lot like its past. Smaller portions, seasonal menus, local farms, fewer ingredients we can't pronounce. It's not regression, it's remembering. Because in the end, the strength of ancient diets wasn't just in the body, it was in the mindset. They didn't eat to optimize. They ate to live. And that's something worth relearning. So the next time someone tells you they've found the new superfood, smile and nod. You already know the truth. There's nothing new under the sun, just old wisdom, reheated and sold for $12.99. And if you really want to eat like the ancients, don't chase the next miracle seed. Plant one. Let's be honest. No civilization in history has ever worshipped food quite like we do. The ancients built temples to gods. We build juice bars to kale. They prayed for good harvests. We pray our avocados don't go bad before payday. And somewhere, between those two extremes, something extraordinary happened. Food stopped being just food. It became the story. A myth. A movement. A billion-dollar brand. You see, the modern superfood industry didn't start in the kitchen. It started in the boardroom. And its greatest invention wasn't quinoa or acai. It was narrative. Let's rewind to the early 20th century, the golden age of advertising. People had survived wars, depressions, and ration cards. They didn't need superfoods. They needed calories. But once abundance returned, something strange happened. The struggle shifted from finding food to choosing it. And that's when the marketers moved in, like storytellers with better lighting. The first superfood campaign wasn't about quinoa or chia, it was about oranges. In the 1910s, the California Fruit Growers Exchange, now known as Sunkist, realized Americans weren't buying enough oranges. So they did something brilliant. They invented orange juice. Before that, people mostly ate oranges whole. But Sunkist teamed up with ad agencies, doctors, and newspapers to convince America that breakfast wasn't complete without a glass of fresh health. Drink an orange, the slogan said. And just like that, a marketing myth was born. One that still pours out of every hotel breakfast bar a century later. That campaign changed everything, because it proved one simple truth. People don't buy food. They buy meaning. Fast forward to the 1970s, the decade of diet pills, disco, and natural living. The health food movement exploded as people started distrusting processed foods in corporate America. Ironically, the corporations noticed, and they thought, wait, we can sell rebellion. They rebranded the same stuff with words like organic, pure, and ancient. Suddenly, your breakfast cereal wasn't just flakes. It was a spiritual experience. Then came the 1990s, the age of the internet and wellness. We stopped eating for survival. and started eating for identity. Food became a performance. You weren't just vegan, you were enlightened. You didn't drink coffee. You sipped fair trade single origin shade-grown artisanal roast, blessed by monks in Peru. Every bite needed a backstory. And the marketers? They were more than ready. They realized ancient history had everything a brand could want: mystery, authenticity, and zero trademark lawyers. So they dug up forgotten crops, wrapped them in nostalgia, and gave them modern makeovers. Quinoa wasn't just a seed, it was the sacred grain of the Andes. Chia wasn't just bird food, it was the warrior fuel of the Aztecs. Turmeric wasn't just a spice, it was the golden elixir of India. Every ancient culture suddenly had a product line. It's genius when you think about it. They didn't invent anything new, they just sold old things better. That's the magic of the marketing machine. It knows how to turn history into hype and science into slogans. A study mentions antioxidants? Boom. Fights free radicals. Never mind that you don't actually know what a free radical is. Sounds dangerous, right? Better buy two. And here's the wild part. We like being sold these stories, because deep down, they make us feel good, like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. We know we're living in a synthetic world. Fast food, fast news, fast everything. So when someone says, "Hey, this smoothie connects you to 3,000 years of wisdom," it hits differently. It's not just nutrition, it's nostalgia. But the marketing machine didn't stop at the grocery store. It went global, powered by influencers, documentaries, and Instagram aesthetics. You can thank social media for turning quinoa into a lifestyle. A perfect photo of a smoothie bowl with the caption, "Nourish your soul." That's not breakfast. That's branding. The irony, of course, is that most of these superfoods are no longer grown by the cultures that created them. They've been industrialized, exported, and repackaged. What was once local and sacred has become global and generic. The Incas had rituals for planting quinoa. We have barcodes and warehouses, and it's not just the foods. It's the language. Marketers borrow words like ritual, ancient, and pure, but strip them of meaning. It's the cultural equivalent of selling bottled spirituality, mildly flavored, mass-produced enlightenment. Now don't get me wrong, there's nothing evil about liking quinoa or drinking matcha. They're genuinely nutritious. The problem isn't the food, it's the fiction. Because when we believe in miracle foods, we stop asking harder questions about access, equity, and the environment. Take the global quinoa boom. As demand skyrocketed in the 2010s, prices in Peru and Bolivia tripled. Farmers made short-term profit, yes, but local families who'd eaten quinoa for generations could no longer afford it. Western wellness became their hunger. It's the great irony of our age. The more we romanticize ancient wisdom, the more we disconnect from the people who actually live it. The same thing happened with coconut oil, avocado, and acai. Rainforests were cut down to meet demand for eco-friendly superfoods. It's capitalism wearing a flower crown. And yet, despite all that, the myth keeps growing. Because the marketing machine has evolved, it's not just ads anymore. It's culture. It's lifestyle. It's the belief that eating the right things makes you not just healthy but good. That's why wellness brands now talk like prophets. They promise purity, detox, and cleansing. Those aren't scientific terms, they're spiritual ones. Food has become our modern church and the grocery aisle is our altar. We don't buy kale, we confess with it. But here's the twist no one expects. This machine doesn't just manipulate us, it mirrors us. It thrives on what we already want: connection, control, meaning. If we didn't crave those things, no ad could sell them. So maybe the marketing isn't the enemy. Maybe it's just a funhouse mirror, showing us how desperately we want to feel ancient in a world that's moving too fast. That's why every superfood story sounds the same. It's not about nutrients, it's about narrative therapy. You buy the smoothie, you buy the myth, you buy a piece of calm in a noisy world. And for a few minutes, between sips, it almost works. So, is it all fake? Not exactly. Marketing may bend history, but it also keeps it alive. Without it, quinoa might still be forgotten in the Andes. Matcha might have stayed a monk's secret. Turmeric might never have made it out of grandma's kitchen. It's a double-edged sword. One that sells stories but also shares them. And maybe that's the most human part of it all. We're storytellers first, shoppers second. We don't just eat food, we eat meaning. And meaning, as every civilization knows, is what keeps us alive. So the next time you walk past a glowing, green smoothie bar and see Ancient Power Blend but $12, just smile. You're not being fooled. You're participating in a ritual as old as time. The only difference? Now it comes with Wi-Fi and a loyalty card. Science has a funny way of catching up to things our ancestors already knew. It walks in late to the party wearing a lab coat, holding data sheets saying, actually, they were right. For centuries, people have been dismissed for trusting instincts. Old wives' tales, folk medicine, superstitions. And yet, one by one, those old instincts keep turning into peer-reviewed studies. Take turmeric, the golden spice of India. Used for thousands of years to treat inflammation, Western medicine rolled its eyes for decades. Then scientists isolated curcumin, its active compound, and discovered it really does reduce inflammation and support the immune system. Turns out Grandma didn't need a PhD to be correct. Or fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt. People made them long before anyone could spell probiotic. Now microbiologists call them gut health powerhouses. We used to ferment food because we had no refrigerators. Now we do it to live longer. Progress, right? And yet, for all the research and the metrics, something beautiful has happened. Science is no longer just debunking tradition. It's starting to translate it. It's building bridges between intuition and evidence, between myth and molecule. We're realizing that ancient wisdom wasn't magic, it was observation. Generations of trial and error, refined by time disguised as ritual. Even fasting, once seen as religious discipline, has returned with a new name: intermittent fasting. Same idea, different century. People once did it to cleanse the soul. Now we do it to reset metabolism. And the funny thing, it works for both. Modern nutritionists call this ancestral eating. But the truth is simpler. The body doesn't evolve as fast as the menu does. We're still built for the same foods that built us: whole, seasonal, varied, and earned through movement. When we return to those rhythms, everything works a little better. So yes, science can measure antioxidants, omega-3s, and micronutrients. But what it's really rediscovering is context. The art of balance, patience, and connection. Because health isn't just chemistry. It's culture. It's the stories we tell about our food. The gratitude we feel when we eat it, the people we share it with. That's why the strongest lesson from ancient diets isn't eat this superfood. It's slow down. Notice what you eat, where it came from, and who you become after it nourishes you. It's not mystical. It's mindful, and that's where modern science and ancient wisdom finally meet. In awareness, the microscope and the memory shaking hands, agreeing on something timeless. We thrive when we live in rhythm with the world that feeds us. But maybe the most fascinating part isn't what we've learned. It's what we've remembered. That food was never just fuel. It was medicine, ritual, story, identity. Every culture knew that. The Inca fed the body. The Greeks fed the mind. The Japanese fed the spirit. And we, somewhere along the way, are learning to feed all three again. The next revolution in nutrition won't come from a lab or a label. It'll come from curiosity. The same force that built this whole story. Because when you start asking questions about where your food comes from, you stop being a consumer and start becoming a participant. You become part of a 10,000-year conversation between humanity and hunger, between soil and soul, between the myth of the superfood and the truth of what's on your plate. And that's the secret ending, isn't it? The superfood was never the quinoa or the chia or the kale. It was us. Our ability to observe, adapt, remember, and rediscover meaning in the simplest things. That's what made us survive. That's what still makes us thrive. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, think of it this way. Every bite of food you've ever eaten, every fruit, every grain, every seed, carries a piece of ancient memory. It's history you can taste, and maybe if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the echo of those who figured it out first. The farmers, healers, mothers, monks, and wanderers who shaped the menu of the modern world without ever meaning to. They didn't call it wellness. They just called it life, and perhaps that's the final truth worth keeping. That behind all the myths and marketing, all the hashtags and health claims, the greatest wisdom is still the simplest one. Eat what's real. share it with others, and be grateful that you can, because in the end, that's what every civilization, ancient or modern, has ever truly hungered for.